I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. Welcome to Stand Up and Holler. On this episode, we'll discuss the Eastern Washington game, thoughts on Jalen Kitna's debut. Will has some ideas on how to fix the defense for the Gators, and we will finish with the Mizzou preview. Will, jumping right into Eastern Washington here for two bits. Sunday game at home, going up against the NFL a little bit for those of us that like to watch the NFL as well. But after giving up an opening field goal, Florida cracked down and treated an FCS team like an FCS team. No more Sanford memories on that. They took care of business. Richardson opened the game by ripping a 75-yard touchdown pass to Justin Shorter. Florida took the next drive 82 yards in 4 plays to make it clear that this would be a rout on their way to scoring 52 consecutive points. We saw an active receiving core, a solid performance from both 15 and Jalen Kitna, who we'll discuss more in 4 bits. But the Gators, they just roll on in terms of the offensive side. The Florida defense, hey, look, it came through on the scoreboard. 3 points, that's pretty solid there until the only TDs came against the backups late in the game. But the Eagles did manage to put together some drives of 7 of the 11 drives, they had plays of like 7 plays or more on the defense. So they moved the ball a little bit on the defense throughout the day, although the defense did a good job keeping them off the board. So it wasn't exactly a smothering effort, but on the bright side, we did see some fresh faces, get some extended looks with the Gators, starting with, you look at Kamari Wilson, Jadon Hill's back, making the start there this week. Good to see some young guys. You put a team away that you're supposed to put away like this, and what happens? You get to see a lot of young guys roll through here. I know on offense we saw Lorenzo Lingard, and that's the way a game like that is supposed to look, Will.
Yeah, I mean, look, they took care of business. 13.3 yards per play averaged on offense, which is just ridiculous. Anthony Richardson averaged 24 yards an attempt, and that was actually less than he averaged on the ground because he had the one run for 45 yards, and that was it. His numbers for this game were absolutely ridiculous. The defense, like you mentioned, I mean, they gave up 4.8 yards per attempt, which isn't great. The last 2 touchdowns, again, not great. I think the bigger thing is the first 6 drives for Eastern Washington, 13 plays, 11 plays, 5 plays, 7 plays, 3 plays, and 10 plays. There are definitely things that need to be improved. I think Napier even said that in the post-game press conference. There are things that need to be improved on the defensive side of the ball. At the same time, again, the third quarter,
it's not breaking news though, right?
No, and the third quarter they were able to clamp down, right? I mean, you have after that, you have an 8-play drive, then 4-3-4, and then 9-9 to end the game. So that 4-3-4 is the thing you look at and say, okay, well, a couple of 3 and outs and that sort of stuff. But that's kind of the problem, is that we're grasping for straws against Eastern Washington for things that are positive on the defensive side of the ball. At the same time, I will say they only gave up 1 play over 20 plus yards in what I would consider real game time. They gave up 4 in the last 2 drives, which is essentially garbage time, but only 1 20-plus yard play. The issue, especially on the first couple of drives, they gave up 6 plays of 10 to 19 yards in those first 2 drives, and that's why Eastern Washington was able to move the ball down the field. They only gave up 2 in the next 4 drives, and so that was the difference. That was when it started to switch. That was when Florida started to get the ball back, and that distance specifically, where you have the opening play of the game where there's the throw out in the flat, Amari Birdie misses the tackle, and the guy goes for 11 instead of being a 1-yard gain. That is the area where Florida is going to have to improve in order to have an improved defense. I think they'll be able to do it, but I didn't see anything in this game that goes, hey, that's a panacea.
Hey, Lorenzo Lingard sighting finally. Why is Lingard not getting any run this year, Will? Because I mean, the guy, when he gets the ball, he looks like he can do stuff with it.
I mean, I guess who are you going to bench him for? I mean, I think, Naquan Wright certainly has locker room support and has the ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. We saw Montrell Johnson catch the ball and not know what to do to get a first down at some point in the game. And I want to say, was it ETN who caught it and got knocked down short as well? Both running backs were trying to make big plays rather than just get the first down. Look, you can't always go for the home run. And so I wonder whether you got Naquan Wright for that purpose and picking up the blitz. Usually when there's a talented running back who's not playing, it's because he's not picking up blitz packages. It's because he's not in the right place. He's not doing the right things, during practice, those sorts of things. I have no idea what's going on with Lingard. He looked explosive, but again, he was against Eastern Washington. A lot of people looked explosive this weekend.
But you would think there's a role, some kind of role for that guy.
Maybe. I mean,
maybe he's not in on third down. I get it, but like, it's just surprising to me. Like, he did look good enough to where it's like, and I'm not judging against Eastern Washington per se. I was looking at him specifically. He did look good enough where it's like, man, this guy, why we don't see him at all? It's just interesting.
You do wonder why he's not back on kickoff returns, or why he's not back, or why he's not doing something on special teams. But maybe that's part of it, right? I mean, when's the last time Florida blocked a punt? And if you get in on the punt team, or you get in on the kick, field goal defense team, and you can make a play there, well, that's how you earn your way onto the field. And look, you got to earn your way out of the field. I think that's one of the things that Napier's clearly has made clear. So I don't know. I look at it and I go, I don't understand it. At the same time, I'm not there, and the running game isn't struggling. So when you factor all those things together, like, you got to replace someone who's doing pretty well. The only guy we've sort of looked at all year long and said, hey, maybe you could replace him, is Naquan Wright. But again, he seems to provide something in the passing game, especially with Kitna in there, that is in addition to the passing game that maybe you don't get with the other two guys. And so having him out there in that capacity becomes important.
We'll get into the defense more for 6 bits, but so let's keep this more on the offense from this game here. Another solid outing by the receiver core. Ricky Pierce saw a nice little run on that what was that, 75-yard, 76-yard run there for the touchdown on the reverse. We saw Henderson get some action, shorter on the big play. 2 games in a row of pretty nice play from the receiver core that was really struggling in the first few games. Well,
yeah, well, I mean, look, I think obviously the 75-yard throw to shorter helps his average, but he's now averaging 22 yards a catch. Like, he is the downfield threat for Anthony Richardson right now, and he's a big guy and he can go up and get it. Didn't have to on this one. He actually beat the corner. That's a nice way to open up the game, though. You're down 3-0. Everybody's sort of like, the defense didn't really get a stop, sort of some rumbling in the swamp, and then bam, absolutely hits it. I'll tell you, the guy I've been really impressed with is Zipper. Zipper's starting to get open. Richardson's starting to find him. Obviously, that beast play against Tennessee where he just runs over half of Tennessee's defense for the touchdown. But again, he's a weapon who caught a ball in the flat this time, and again punished the guys who came in to take him down. So I think the receiving core is not fantastic, but it's serviceable. And I think when Richardson's on target, Florida's receivers are open enough. And look, I think when they can get a step on people, nobody's catching them, at least thus far. So, look, I think you asked the question about Lingard. I think you can say the same thing about Pearsall. Why is he not back on kickoffs too? It might be he's so valuable that you don't want him back on kickoffs and those sorts of things. But that's one of the reasons why you put a guy like Lingard in there. But yeah, I mean, look, I'm not going to walk out of this offensive performance and criticize anybody on the offensive side of the ball. You got Garage going all the way down on the reverse for Pearsall. Put him in there on kickoff returns. He looked like he had pretty good speed. Certainly, he has the celebratory moves after the score. We need more of that from Richard Garage.
Yeah, we miss you, Brandon James. We still miss you. 4 bits, Will. Let's move on. Let's talk about Jalen Kitna's debut after going up 38-3 in the mid-third quarter. Jalen Kitna enters the game, ends up going 8 of 12 for 152 yards and a touchdown. Made a great first impression by hitting Caleb Douglas for 62-yard touchdown, his first pass attempt after taking over for Richardson. Kitna would lead another touchdown drive, set Florida up with another field goal attempt late, which was ultimately missed, I believe. But the lingering nightmare of every Gator fan that we've been talking about all offseason is, if something happened to Anthony Richardson, what does that mean for this team? Obviously, we had to transfer in with Jack Miller from Ohio State. Miller's been injured, haven't seen any of him. But nice to know, Will. In my opinion, I looked at Kitna. The guy looked smooth. He looked like he was in control. It looks like we have a pretty competent backup. I'm not saying this isn't an Emory Jones, Anthony Richardson discussion from last year. Richardson, clearly the entrenched guy, but the fear of every fan has been, what if something happens to 15? And I'll tell you, it looks like we got a pretty competent backup in Jalen Kitna. Will.
Yeah, I mean, look, I don't think Kitna did anything to harm our opinion of him. Again, I think we need to look at the Eastern Washington opponent and say, did that have something to do with it? I actually look back
to some extent.
So, I look back 2015 against New Mexico State. Treon Harris went 14-19, 215 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a 203 QB rating. He did not replicate that later on in the year, put it that way, right? So, a performance against a team that's quite honestly overmatched isn't something we should sit there and go, oh yeah, Kitna needs to come in and replace Anthony Richardson, which is funny because there were some people on Twitter who were saying that. Obviously that's ridiculous, but I think the fear was that you just don't know what you're getting. Now I think we saw him run the flood. We saw him run the flood successfully multiple times. Saw him throw the deep pass to Douglas. Obviously, there the safeties actually shifted late. The question I have, and I don't know because he hasn't done it enough times, is did he see the safety shift and so he went that direction, or was he going that direction predetermined? And those are the things we're going to find out over time. And look, it's the safety didn't have the ability to get over there. He's got to make an accurate throw. He's got to get it out on time. He's got to do all those things. At the same time, when you play against a team like, say, LSU or a team like Georgia, well, that safety is going to get over there. And so not only does the throw have to be perfect, but it has to be a little bit earlier. And if that shift doesn't happen, you can't throw it up there because the safety will get over there. So I think a lot of good. Obviously, you go 8 of 12 for 152 yards, average 12.7 yards per attempt. I mean, that's a good day. No doubt about that. I think we feel more comfortable Jalen Kitna than we did before the game. I'm still not all that comfortable about Anthony Richardson going down. This team needs Richardson going into the teeth of the schedule to really be competitive. We talked about the limitations on defense already a little bit. Those limitations are going to crop up, especially against the better teams in the SEC. The good news is some of the teams we thought were going to be juggernauts, teams like Texas A&M can't get out of their own way. The bad news is that teams that we thought were going to be bad maybe are a little bit better when you think about Florida State and potentially even Missouri coming off that game against Georgia last week. So, look, it's never easy in the SEC. You're always going to have to go out there and play well. I think we have more confidence in Kitna today than we did yesterday, or than we did on Saturday. But at the same time, I'm not sitting here going, oh, yeah, I'm fine if Richardson gets hurt and has to miss time. I don't think anybody's that way.
That's a great way to put it. More confidence in that we saw something from him. He was out there. He looked like, the deep ball to Douglas was beautiful. I know he missed one too. He missed a pass deep, but it looked like he can totally comfortable putting the ball downfield, which, we've seen quarterbacks at this school. You mentioned Trayon Harris that not always totally that's not a guarantee. We figured that out the last decade. That's not a guarantee. So I thought it was a good performance overall by Kitna. Obviously, it's Eastern Washington, but there's something back there if it needs to be called upon. That's the way I put it.
Yeah, well, and you can only play against the guys who are out there, right? Kitna has not had his number called. He gets his number called against Eastern Washington. He plays great. So, congratulations, right? I don't want to sound like I'm denigrating him because I'm not. He did everything he was asked to do in the game in which he was put in against the opponents that he was playing.
Right.
There's still more to prove, but what he has proven is that he's not a liability if he comes in a game against an overmatched team. Okay, well, what does that mean if he has to come in against a team that's not overmatched? And hopefully we don't find that out. But if we do, I think we can go back to this and say, okay, look, you need to know what you have in the guy, right? So if something happens to Richardson and he comes in against, say, Georgia and he acquits himself well, now you got a really, really solid backup quarterback, right? Because he's done it multiple games and he's done it against poor competition and excellent competition. If he comes in against Georgia and he's sort of average, okay, well, a lot of people are average against Georgia. And so it sort of depends. The next data point is going to tell us a lot about Kitna's ability, but he did everything he was asked to do and did it well against Eastern Washington. And so, to the point where Napier after the game was saying he's had some practices recently where the ball's not hitting the ground. Last time anybody said that about a Florida quarterback was Kyle Trask. So, look, I'm not calling him Trask, but the signs are pointing towards a guy who has taken some steps forward since Jack Miller's been out, which is great because Florida does need some sort of security blanket behind Richardson just in case.
Speaking of which, what's the latest update on Jack Miller?
So I'm unclear what the latest update is on Jack Miller. It sounds like, that injury, you think about Dak Prescott had a very similar injury with the Cowboys, and it really comes down to the grip on the football, right? Mm-hmm. And so if you can't get a good grip on the football, you're going to turn the ball over. You're not going to be able to make effective throws. And, those are finicky injuries. And so exactly when he's going to come back, I'm not sure the program's even really given an update on Miller. I think the other aspect of it is that Kitna's been taking those second team reps. I don't know how good Miller was before. I think he was the guy that they looked at and said, this guy has experience. This guy has some experience, but it was not like he had 150 snaps at Ohio State. No. So really, you look at him, Kitna doesn't have a whole lot fewer snaps than Jack Miller does. And what we just saw in terms of statistics look better than what Jack Miller had at Ohio State in his mop-up time. And so, I think honestly, there's probably a competition when Miller gets back. I don't think you just hand him the second job,
which is
based on what we've seen.
encouraging. It's encouraging to know there's a little depth there behind Anthony Richardson if needed, if called upon, right? All right, let's move on to 6-bits here. Hey, we talked about that defense earlier. We've been harping on the defense the last couple of weeks. Somebody gave the defense an F through the first 4 games here. It wasn't me, but Will, you've if we played Eastern Washington in the first 4 games, would it have still been an F?
Maybe.
No, come on.
No, I mean, look,
you can admit it. So,
no,
I real quick though, you basically wrote a great article this week. Similar, you wrote an article about how to fix Anthony Richardson a couple weeks ago. That was really interesting. Same concept here with the defense. Basically, the major problem that you found, you pointed out that big plays are not necessarily the Achilles heel for this defense this season. So, what did you find to be the major issues? What's really wrong with this Florida defense in 2022 so far?
I mean, the biggest issue is those plays I mentioned earlier between 10 and 19 yards. They are giving them up at a much higher clip than they did last year, and they're giving them up at an incredibly high clip just in general for the country. So, I mean, if you look at, if you look at and what that ends up doing is that the 3rd and 6 turns into a first down. The 1st and 10, where maybe you have a 1 yard, you stop them for 1, they turn it into 12. And it just sort of starts the drive. Like if you think of those old Oregon teams where what they needed was 1 first down and then they were going fast. And most offenses tend to operate like that. The coaches come out, they're a little bit conservative. If you can get them in a 3rd and 8, well, now maybe they take a check down because they're worried about turning the ball over in their own territory. If they can put a 15-yard gain and then a 12-yard gain back to back, now they start to get aggressive. Now they start taking shots downfield. We even saw that with Kentucky. Florida was able to hold Kentucky pretty well until Kentucky got a couple of plays to put them at midfield, and then Levis takes the deep shot, and all of a sudden it's 7-3, Kentucky's ahead. So they have just given up way too many plays in that range. And the reason I say that is when you look at last year in terms of plays that were 20 to 29 yards or 30 to 39 yards or 40 to 49 or so on, essentially on a percentage basis for the number of plays, they're right where they were last year. Now, last year wasn't a great defense, but it wasn't this bad. The one place that they gave up, I think it was like 13% of their overall plays went for 10 to 19 yards. This year, it's 18% of the plays. So basically a 1 in 5 shot that when the offense snaps the ball, they're going to get more than 10 yards. Mm-hmm. That's probably not good. Because it means, what it means is you're not getting any 3 and outs. What it means is that they're able to drive down the field. And that's just 1 in 5, right? So if you have a couple of 3 and outs, well, that means the next time they're out there, they just gained 45 yards. And, we laughed a little bit about the Tennessee game where it felt like Tennessee was always in Florida territory right off the bat. And some of that was due to the busts, and some of that was due to being able to get into Florida territory. But there was no stopping them, even when, they were able to drive down the field at will, regardless of whether it was 70-yard plays or whether it was 15-yard plays. And that is, to me, the explosive plays are the things that are difficult to stop, right? When a coverage is completely blown and a guy's wide open, that's one player. It's going to happen sometimes. You have coverage busts, those sorts of things. If you're, the play I'm really thinking about is the one where they went deep against Jason Marshall, Tennessee did. That was pretty good coverage there at the end of the half. Make a great play, right? You can't really
about the diving catch right before
the diving
halftime.
catch. You can't really take that play away. You can maybe play defense where you give him some help from a safety and those sorts of things. But, at the end of the day, like, you had good coverage, they made a better play, and you just, say, okay, tip your cap and move on. The place where I think they can make hay is in that 10 to 19 yard area, because most of those plays are 4-yard plays, 5-yard plays, 6-yard plays that turn into 15 because the tackles missed. And you saw that very early on against Eastern Washington. The first play out of the gate, there's a little throw. Amari Burney has an opportunity to bring the guy down a yard from the line of scrimmage, turns into an 11-yard gain. 3 plays later on a 3rd down and 6, there's a throw out. Jadon Hill, granted, first playing time of the year, right? But Jadon Hill's out there. Guy catches the ball 2 yards behind the sticks. If he brings him down a yard or 2 behind the sticks, Florida forces him to punt. They get the ball. We're having a very different conversation. Instead, he's able to shake off that tackle, goes down and gains 8 more yards, like a 16, 17-yard gain. So those types of things, it's a tackling thing. And so, you can even see it in the running plays where the linebackers aren't necessarily in the right gap. One of the plays I highlighted in my recap for Eastern Washington was a play where essentially Ventrell Miller and Jason Marshall ran into each other. and no one was in the cutback lane when the running back came through. So some of it's assignment. Some of it is, I think the vast majority of it is tackling. Some of it is they're giving it up, right? You've got defensive backs who are playing back further than maybe we would like, or maybe given what we saw in the Grantham era, they're playing a little bit further back. But that is the area. Like every time you see a play that should have been a 4-yard gain that turns into a 15-yard gain, that is the thing that's killing Florida's defense. If they can reduce that, you're not going to eliminate it. You're going to miss tackles sometimes, but if they can reduce it more in the 10, 11, 12% of the total plays, as opposed to 18% of the total plays, they got 57 plays that have gone between 10 and 19 yards over 5 games. So it's more than 10 a game. In fact, it's more than 11 a game. If you're sitting there at that point, if you can reduce that to 5, 6, 7, now all of a sudden your defense is going to get off the field. And that's the thing, is that, every time I watch, I'm sitting there going, God, it'd be great, especially the last couple of games. It'd be great if Florida's offense could just get the ball back. And the minute they got the ball back against Eastern Washington, Florida, pop, 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 touchdown, touchdown, touchdown. And what did we need against Tennessee? We needed 1 or 2 stops, right? And that would have given Anthony Richardson the ability to bring him back. Saw the same thing last year against LSU, right? So this isn't new, but if you're going to focus anywhere, I think it's that place. I think it's tackling. I think it's making sure you're going for the near hip. That was something that Donovan McMillan said on Gators Breakdown during the offseason, was really working on tracking the near hip of the guy who catches the ball. You're not trying to prevent him from catching the ball. You're trading the down for the 3 yards. And I got to be honest, I can't remember the last 3-yard pass that the opposition had against Florida. Like, it feels like they're going for 7, 8, 9, 18 yards every time there's a swing pass out into the flat or anything like that. I really can't remember the last time there was a tackle for loss out on one of those screens, a bubble screen or something like that.
Yeah, it feels like the problem can stem from every level of the defense has its own issue right now. You look at the defensive line on a pass, they're not getting a ton of pass rush, on ton of push up front. The linebackers are late to coverages. They're filling in the wrong gaps, and that puts a lot of pressure on the secondary as well. And hey, Will, you talked about the coverage within the secondary. I have noticed a lot of instances where, third down, we're lining up, our guys are lined up almost well behind the first down marker at times, and they just have an easy throw at it. It seems like that's the scheme, Will, but is there something specific you're seeing on that? Well, I mean, what is called, like, it seems like at times it's almost like too much, it's almost egregiously large, the amount of space they're giving the receiver.
Well, so I mean, I think you go back to what you said earlier about pass rush. Florida has 8 sacks in 5 games. They're averaging 1.6 sacks per game. Amari Burning leads the team with 4. Shamar James has 1. So you got 5 sacks from your linebackers and only 3 from your defensive line. So 1 from Prince Uman-Milan, 1 from Justice Boone, a half from Gravon Dexter. You're not getting the pressure that you need from your front 4. And so look, on third down, when the quarterback knows he has to get rid of it quickly, when he has to rush, when he knows someone's going to be in his face, he's going to rush. He's going to miss some throws. And you basically say, look, we'll give you the little slant. If you complete it, cool. We'll move on to the next one. But we think we can get enough pressure. We think that we can close on that slant. We think we can do some things that are going to help. The problem is, if you get 0 pressure, you can't close on that slant, not aggressively, because if you do, and the ball's right on line, right in the guy's breadbasket, he's running for a touchdown. And so they have not been willing to go cover 0 and go man on the outside. That's probably a good thing. They've tried a few things. I mean, the defensive article I wrote had Tony trying everything. I mean, he tried zone. He tried zone with the linebackers, cover 2. He tried cover 1 where he's playing man on the outside. He tried some cover 2 with man underneath with the linebackers. He tried, I don't know what he tried on a couple of the busts, because some guys were playing man and some guys were playing zone. In fact, that confusion, I think, is adding to some of the problems. But the issue to me is, no matter what he's calling, it's either not being executed properly or they're not able to win one-on-one battles. And look, we talked all offseason about simulated pressures and creepers and things like that. And that stuff's all well and good, but that's trying to trick the offensive line. There was a play against Tennessee where they blitzed 6 against the 5-man offensive line and didn't get any pressure on Hendon Hooker. And it wasn't because Hooker had this short route where he was throwing a hot route. Basically, Trevez Johnson was out there on an island against a wide receiver from Tennessee. He was pretty good. I think it was Hyatt. Might have been Brew McCoy. But one of those guys was out there on Trevez Johnson one-on-one. Johnson has to give him a has to give him a cushion. He's not fast enough to stay with him. He's not a covered safety. And even if he was, like, you still as a safety have to give the guy a cushion. What you're relying on is that when you rush 6 against 5, you're going to get home, that you're going to make Hooker uncomfortable. And they just didn't do that, at least not often enough. And, I don't know where it went, because against Utah, it felt like they were in the backfield a lot. But I think you look at, bringing in Justice Boone as a starter this week against Eastern Washington. I think that's part of it. You're just trying to get a spark from the defensive line. It doesn't mean Human Mullins played poorly. It doesn't mean that Dexter and Cox have played poorly. But one of the things is that there were 7.5 sacks from Zachary Carter last year, and he was able to slide inside and provide some girth up the middle. In fact, that was one of our concerns early on in the year, is that without defensive tackles, he was going to have to slide into the middle. Did you lose something at defensive end? Brenton Cox had 8 sacks on the other side. So you were getting pass rush from Cox. Cox has 0 sacks this year, and no one has stepped up on the defensive line to replace the production that Zachary Carter was producing. So, I don't know what you do about that. You got to win some one-on-one battles. You have to get around the edge sometimes. You have to get after the quarterback. And if you can't beat a tackle one-on-one, that's just a problem, because you're going to end up in some situations where you have to win those battles sometimes. And Florida just hasn't won them enough so far. And maybe that'll change. Maybe that'll improve. Maybe you can bring some blitzes from some creative places. But the problem is, when you blitz from a creative place, well, that opens up a hole someplace else. You're putting, there's a play against Tennessee where I think it was Antoine Rowland or Powell Ryland was out and he wound up diving for a ball that was out to a wide receiver, and he missed him. And then Trey Dean came in and missed a tackle, and that turned into one of the 15-yard plays I was talking about. But the defensive end playing underneath coverage in a zone coverage against a wide receiver against Tennessee, is that really where you want your defensive end playing? You'd much rather have him rushing the passer with a linebacker who's more adept in coverage out in that exact same spot. The reason you end up with that situation is because you're sending the linebacker and having the defensive end fall into coverage, because you're trying to overload one side of the offensive line or the other. And that just hasn't worked. Even when they've overloaded one side of the offensive line, they're not getting home.
Well, another chance to develop here. Let's move on to $1. Missouri comes to town after quite a game against Georgia. Well, I am no Missouri fan over here. And
come on, Drinkwitz is your favorite coach.
They looked awfully good against Georgia the other night. I know Georgia was a little off, but we're welcoming in 2-3 Missouri to the Swamp for homecoming this weekend. And despite the bravado of little Eli Drinkwitz, Mizzou they've yet to notch a Power 5 win. So I will say that about them. They beat Louisiana Tech and Avalon Christian so far. They were blown out at Kansas State. They dropped the ball at Auburn, literally, and they choked late against Georgia last weekend. On offense, you're looking at Brady Cook, first full season as a starter here. He's not thrown for more than 200 yards against Power 5 opponent yet. He does have the ability to run, but there's 2 SEC games so far. We really haven't seen it. In the 3 non-conference games, he rushed for 61, 56, and 42 yards, but he's in the negative. He's got negative rushing yardage against SEC opponents. Nathaniel Pete, Cody Schrader in the backfield, 1-2 punch, averaging a little over 50 yards a pop, while combining for 4 touchdowns. We saw wide receiver Luther Burden get some action last weekend against Georgia. Ultimately only had 3 receptions, but got a couple flags thrown against him. 5-star kid there at Mizzou. He's really yet to have a fully breakout performance. Dominic Lovett leads the team with 27 receptions for 460 yards and 2 touchdowns. Barrett Bannister and Mookie Cooper, great name there, are also contributors in the passing game. Defensively, Florida transfer Tyron Hopper, 2 sacks, 1 pick on the season while racking up 32 tackles. Well, overall, the Missouri defense does have a lot of optimism after really doing a nice job against Georgia last weekend. It was really for the bulk of the game. Georgia did a nice job at the very end of the game, actually mounting that comeback. But Mizzou comes into this game, you have to think they're going to be totally confident. They're going to be on top of their game coming into it after a near miss against Georgia. And hey, this Florida defense versus that Missouri offense, it looked like Missouri last weekend against Georgia. They're moving the ball. They're making plays pretty consistently against the Georgia defense. The Gators better be ready for this one.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's the mantra for the entire year, right? Is that the Gators aren't good enough to just roll the ball on the field and beat anybody, right? I mean, that's the reality. Now look, it helps that Stetson Bennett and Kendall Milton both lost fumbles. It helps that Bennett just wasn't himself. He airmailed some guys who were out there. Winds up 24-43 for 312 yards, but a lot of that was in that fourth quarter when he led the comeback. Missouri still struggled to run the ball against Georgia, 21 attempts for 102 yards. Brady Cook just 20 of 32 for 192 yards with a touchdown, only averaged 6 yards a throw. And if you look at his averages over the year, against Auburn, averaged 7.5 yards a throw. Against Abilene Christian, 9.7. We were just talking about Eastern Washington. Anthony Richardson averaged 24 per attempt, and then Jalen Kitna averaged 12. So not really all that impressive there from Cook. You look at Kansas State, he averaged 4.7 yards per throw, and against Louisiana Tech 7.4. So my yards above replacement has him negative. He's negative 0.51. He's been negative in every game except for the one against Louisiana Tech and Abilene Christian. So you mentioned those are two teams that they have beaten, right? And those are two teams that are pretty bad. But the times that he's been positive in his yards above replacement are the times that they've won the game. The problem for him is that Kansas State, Auburn, and Georgia, maybe not Georgia, but Kansas State and Auburn are much closer to Florida than Louisiana Tech and Abilene Christian is. And so there's a reason why Missouri is not favored. Look, I think there are two schools of thought here, though, right? One is that Missouri is like riding high after taking Georgia all the way to the finish line. The other is they're absolutely beat up after an emotional game against Georgia where they think they should have won. Now they're coming on the road. They're going to come into Florida. Florida's got some confidence on the offensive side of the ball, got something to prove. And, those defensive players have heard us, right? They've heard what's been said about them. And Missouri's offense isn't very good. They're 82nd overall in the country, 5.1 yards per play. They're only scoring 25 points a game. So the strength of this Missouri team is on the defensive side of the ball. So what you really have is you have a Florida defense that it's its weakness against the Missouri offense that it's weakness. You've got a Florida offense that it's strength against the Missouri defense that it's strength. So you've got strength on strength and weakness on weakness, as opposed to Tennessee, where we looked at it and said, oh crap, Tennessee's offense is definitely their strength and Florida's defense is definitely their weakness. Is this going to be a problem? And it turned out it was. And so, look, I mean, I talked about those 10 to 19 yard plays. Missouri only has 39 of them on the whole year, 12% of their total plays. That's right where we really want Florida's defense to be. So to me, that's the story. If you look at it and say, all right, so 39 in 5 games, they really don't have that many, right? They're averaging 8 per game. So that to me is the key stat. If you look up and they've got 6, 7, 8, 11 or 10 to 19 yard plays, then I would say Florida's going to be way ahead. If they have 15, 16, all right, now we've got some issues because Florida, with a turnover or two, might end up having to play from behind. And that, I think, is actually the story. Because if you look, football is a pretty simple game. Most of the time, the team with the best quarterback wins. And Anthony Richardson has been the best quarterback on the field in 3 of Florida's 5 games. It's close if you compare him to Tennessee. I actually think he played better than Hooker that game. It's just that Florida's defense wasn't quite as much a sieve as Tennessee's was. Hooker played really well too, but at least equivalent to Hendon Hooker there in the Tennessee game, right? Eastern Washington, clearly the best player in the field. Utah, clearly the best player in the field. He might have been the worst player in the field against Kentucky, though, and he was not much better against USF. So that's the question. Is we've had a lot of really, really good Anthony Richardson, and we've had a lot of really bad Anthony Richardson. We haven't had anything in between. And if he just puts up a tweener, I think Florida wins this one pretty easy. If he puts up a good one, I think Florida wins this pretty easy. If he puts up a stinker, well, now Brady Cook and Anthony Richardson start to even out. And in that case, I think Florida's defense becomes a major disadvantage. So this is one of those where I think the volatility of the teams, their attitudes coming in, all the different things that are going on. And, one thing I think we shouldn't discount, and this is something that maybe I have discounted in all this, is that Florida's game was moved to Sunday because of a giant hurricane coming through. And a lot of those players were affected by it, and their families were affected by it, and those sorts of things as well. So, they go out there and they play, but were they completely focused on Eastern Washington? Well, certainly not, because Billy Napier already said they were game planning for Missouri on Thursday before the game started. And their schedule got changed. These guys are creatures of habit, all that sort of stuff. So hopefully they sort of get back on schedule. Hopefully all of their family, their extended family, their friends, all those folks are doing okay, and things sort of settle down to normal. And in a normal week, Is Florida's defense maybe going to be able to settle in against an offense that quite honestly is the worst offense they've faced so far? And so, when I gave Florida's defense an F last week, you joked about the teams that they had played, and all of which were great arguments until I started bring up USF stats after the Florida game. But look, that's a reality, right? Is that Tennessee is a great offensive team. Utah is a good offensive team. Kentucky is a solid offensive team. I don't think they're great, but those are quality teams that Florida's been playing. I think Missouri is a rung down. The question is, where does Florida sit in that ladder? And we're going to find that out.
Yeah. Anybody who watched that Kentucky Ole Miss game on Saturday, I got to say, Kentucky looked pretty good. I thought that team was, they fought that whole game. They fought, and I thought that Kentucky team maybe a little better than I thought they were going into that. I wasn't buying into the top 10 ranking despite the win in the Swamp. They definitely looked pretty good down in Oxford. Missouri, I'm expecting a fight here. I'm expecting a challenge definitely in the first half. What I'd like to see is that the offense, I think the defense is what it is for the Gators this year. We're just going to have to kind of, when they're on the field, let's just hold on to our seats and hope something good happens. What you want to see from this game, where I'm really going to be looking at this team going into LSU and Georgia and Texas A&M here, big part of the meteor schedule, really. Can Richardson, the offense, keep it rolling? Can that running game stay on track? Does Anthony Richardson continue to build on the performances he's had the last couple times? Because this team is going to be heavily reliant on the offense to get the W's. We talked about it all offseason. It's as excited as we are about Billy Napier building the recruiting classes, getting back to championship level contention. This program has to take a real look in the mirror and say, let's take care of Kentucky. Let's take care of Missouri. Let's take care of South Carolina on a regular basis. We've been getting picked off by these teams all throughout the last decade. We've already been picked off by Kentucky. Go out, you're at home, take care of business in this one, lock it in, get prepared for that LSU Georgia A&M stretch coming up.
So you're telling me 6-6 against South Carolina over the last 12 years is a problem? Yeah. Look, so I agree with you in some respects. I think the thing I'm looking for is Missouri's offense is terrible through the air. Challenge them, right? Like, you think about what can we change? Well, you change things week to week in your game plan. And if I look at it and I say, where should Florida be able to exploit them? It should be challenging Brady Cook. And that means two different things, right? I mean, one, it means get up there and man-to-man, play bump and run, challenge the wide receivers. Well, maybe that's not the way to challenge him. I mean, the way to challenge him may be to sit in the zone. Don't worry about getting pressure. Make him hit throws in tight zones. Hell, drop 8 half the time and make him hit those passes within the zone. I'm not sure he can do it. And if he can't, he's mobile, but he's not Cam Rising mobile, right? So, and one of the things that happened in that game against Rising, Florida was actually able to get some pressure there. But when they got pressure, they weren't able to bring him down. We saw that with Hooker against Tennessee. The Cox play on that 3rd and 10 is the one that sort of jumps to mind about that sort of stuff. You're going to need to win some one-on-one battles up front. But even if you don't, can you win the battles in the secondary? Because they're an awful offensive team, especially through the air. And so just take advantage of it, right? Granted, Florida hasn't been great in pass defense, but a lot of that is tackling, and a lot of that is the big plays that they've given up. So hopefully with some of the changes that have been made, obviously, I don't know whether Tradine's going to be healthy and be in the game, but Kamari Wilson acquitted himself pretty well. At least there weren't any coverage busts that were like obvious that we saw back there, or at least there wasn't anything that turned into a play. Now, maybe it's just that the Eastern Washington quarterback couldn't take advantage of some of the busts that Hendon Hooker was able to see right away. But that to me is sort of the thing, is if you're looking at this is a if Missouri lights up Florida through the air, we got real problems on the defensive side of the ball, because this is an offense that should not be able to throw the ball. And for all the inability to get South Florida off the field and those sorts of things, they didn't throw the ball very well in that game. And so that's kind of what I'm looking for here. I don't think Florida's going to get off the field every time. I don't expect like 6 straight 3-and-outs, but can you shut down the passing game for Brady Cook? Because if you do that, I don't think Missouri's good enough running the ball to put up just endless amounts of points against your team. And so that's going to give Anthony Richardson a shot. And the way the offense has been humming over the last couple of games, I think that'll be enough for Florida. So that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the passing defense of Florida to take on and challenge Brady Cook and make him beat them. And hey, if he does, you tip your cap and say, look, our game plan didn't work. But that's where I think they're going to end up focusing.
There would be nothing sweeter than sending Little Eli to 0-3 in the SEC. What color do you think Billy Napier's lightsaber will be after the game?
I don't know. Hopefully, maybe they'll give him that little drum major thing that they've got on the sidelines for the turnovers and the big plays.
God, they talked about that about 97 times on the broadcast on Sunday.
Yeah, well, all I know is, and this is gonna sound awful and not very humble, but I'm gonna say it. I got a lot of confidence. I love that color guy for that game. There was so much football jargon in that game. Anybody who watches that, that it was like watching it with your grandpa who played football, 15 years ago. I don't believe in analytics. Like, I don't like stars. What stars? It's like, oh, this is great. I'm loving every minute of this.
Yeah, definitely. That's your Sunday ESPN crew, man. That's your Sunday ESPN crew right there.
Well, they tweeted out after Kitna. So ESPN tweeted out after Kitna hit the long pass that Anthony Richardson was humming, and they tagged him on Twitter. And so Gator fans had some fun with that because they're like, yeah, that's not Anthony Richardson. I saw one guy tweet out that I'd give him credit if I remembered who it was, but I saw one guy tweet out that they had the Sunday level NCAA crew on the social media for ESPN as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Hey, the Gators had their third string guys in the same time ESPN had theirs. So it's good. Everybody gets some work. Everybody got some work there. So hopefully the Gators translate. I think that's a very positive sign what they did with EWU this past weekend. They kept their foot on the gas. They did what they're supposed to. They took the game serious. Let's see that translate into a building performance into this Missouri game and hopefully come away with the first SEC win of the season, Will. So we'll see that because it's important stretch coming up after that.
Absolutely, man. Absolutely. I think, that we're starting to get to a point now, like we have a feel for what the team is. And we're moving into now where we're really going to start to see the build portion of what Napier has. Like the goals in the SEC. I mean, I know there's like some convoluted way that Florida might be able to win the SEC East. It's not happening. So, that game against Georgia pretty much sealed it. That was the one thing that might have cracked.
I'm not going to lie. I was dreaming a little when Georgia was down. I was like, hey, this changes the race a little bit here.
I will say, is there anything better than hate watching Georgia with your friends, like texting back and forth and sitting there on Twitter, like, just like, turning the knife on the people that who are from Georgia, and that's pretty fun. So we need to win more often so we can do that, because when Florida's not playing, there's nothing they can say back. So that was great.
As much as I don't like Little Eli, the fat kicker from Missouri just feels like a win for guys like us. Will.
Well, I mean, look, he's in way better. He's in way better shape than I am. So let's just put it at that.
For a kicker.
Well, I mean, I don't know.
Fat's relative. Fat for a kicker.
Like Janikowski wasn't exactly in the best shape I've ever, that I remember.
Everybody loved that guy.
Well, that is sort of the fun part, right? Is that you're saying for a kicker, but I think what we're really saying is that there should be like a weight minimum for kickers, because it's fun when those guys go out there and
if where the kicker's over 250, it's a 4-point field goal.
Well, was it UCF or Central a few years ago who had the guy who was just enormous, who was their punter?
Georgia Tech.
Georgia Tech,
the Steelers punter, if I'm not mistaken. I'm blanking on his name.
Oh, that guy's awesome. He's awesome.
I think he won the Ray Guy Award.
And we're not making fun of it. I mean, we're part of that club, so
just more like Larry David always talks about bald guys, so just giving a shout out. That's all we're doing right now.
There you go, buddy.
Yeah. Final word before we go out. Watching the devastation down there in Naples and Fort Myers this past week, just tough to watch, man. Tough to watch with Hurricane Ian coming in. Thinking about everybody who was affected by the storm, and I'm still in the Tampa area here. There's still people. I'm still seeing the power line crews go around every day. I know there's a lot of people across the state who have been affected by it. Just thinking about everybody out there and just hoping that everything gets back to normal as soon as possible. And for those of you that were severely affected, definitely thinking about you. And, just terrible thing that we saw there, Will.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, whenever a storm hits, it's awful, but especially when it changes track right at the last minute. So, the people in Fort Myers and Cape Coral and Naples, until a day or two beforehand, it wasn't even really a possibility that they were going to get hit. And all of a sudden the storm changes direction. And, I've got family down there in that Fort Myers, Cape Coral area. So I was getting updates while they were getting drilled by the thing. And it was there for a while, right? I mean, it was like, 12, 13, 14 hours that people were experiencing those sorts of winds. And we've been getting rain up here in Philadelphia the last 3 days that are remnants from Ivan. Somebody commented about wanting the sun to come out. And I'm like, yeah, can you imagine this with 140-mile-an-hour winds to go along with it? And, that's no joke. So, my sister told me yesterday when I talked to her that there's just areas that are completely just blitzed. And you look at that and go, God, somebody's home got knocked down. And it makes all this stuff seem relatively unimportant. So hopefully all those people have insurance. If they don't, I'm hoping and praying there are people down there to help take them in and help them rebuild. And certainly if there are things we can do, some of that hopefully is just providing content so that people can take their mind off of it. But also if there are things we could do, information we can get out there, certainly we'll do that as we can. Because look, Florida's home. I mean, I live in Philadelphia, but Florida's home, and you live in Florida, right? So I was sitting there texting you, wondering how you were doing as stuff was going on. And luckily, it missed your home in terms of devastation and stuff like that, but didn't miss everybody. And so, yeah, we're thinking about everybody down there who's affected.
Hey, Mizzou this week. Let's have a great game. Go Gators.
Go Gators.
Thank you for watching this episode of Stand Up and Holler. Be sure to subscribe to the Read and Reaction YouTube channel. Join our Patreon community at Read and Reaction for bonus content each week. And check out our website at readandreaction.com. I'm Nick Knudsen, joined by Will Miles. And as always, go Gators.